Welcome to the Red Sea. We're here for our liveaboard diving in Hurghada, and we're about to go down to the Marina, for our liveaboard. So behind me is our liveaboard, Emperor Asmaa. We're going to be spending the next week diving up to 4 times a day. So why don't I take you on board and show you what it's like?
The marina was beautiful to walk around on the way to our boat. After walking past some beautiful super yachts, we arrived at Emperor Asmaa, where we removed our shoes to walk down the gangplank and explore what we had on the boat. There was of course a briefing with some orange juice to start us off and some snacks as well. Next we got to set up our equipment, go to our cabins, and of course we had a quick cabin tour before we went down for dinner.
And welcome to our cabin. It's actually pretty spacious, kind of given the fact that we're on a boat. We're on the upper deck, so hopefully we can have a bit of a view in the mornings. Got a couple of beds, and it's come with a nice setup. So we have towels that we need, the bedding, the bed feels quite comfortable, safety equipment like fire extinguisher, etc. And hopefully it'll be a nice week inside our little liveaboard. And then we've even got our own head, aka a bathroom in boat speak. And I mean, it's not huge, but it's got our own little wet room. We've got a nice window again that we can look out of, some clever storage so things don't knock about when we're under passage. And honestly, so excited now.
Dinner was in the main lounge, where there was self-service, delicious food set up. We enjoyed the night view of Hurghada before heading to bed, ready for day 2.
Good morning. We've woken up to the most stunning morning and just going to have a cup of tea, have breakfast, waiting for permission to leave the port, and then we will be off to our first dive. So we're doing a check dive and then on the full trip.
And as we were doing our dive briefing, we pulled out of the port. This was for our check and first dive, which was to be at Dolphin House. This was a great introductory dive. It was nice and shallow, and we soon saw lots of wildlife, including red sea sailfin tang, regal angelfish, Mars butterfly fish, where you can also see the vast coral wall that the dive site had, parrotfish, Mars pufferfish, a clownfish, striated fusiliers, which was circling us, as well as blue spotted rays, giant clams with this beautiful blue colour, dwarf toby, and an initial glimpse into how large some of this coral can get, as you can see as we got to the top of it. We also practiced deploying an SMB before we then came to the surface, put our SMB away, and onto the boat, where we had a quick lunch after the dive before starting the passage to the north of the Red Sea. This passage was rough, and I did spend a fair amount leaning over the side, my own fault as I didn't take seasickness tablets. So I didn't get much footage until we arrived at the site of our next dive, the Dunraven, which we were able to dive at sunset. This is a historic wreck in Egypt, which sunk in 1876 and lies at a depth of around 27 metres. It's 80 metres by 10 metres and was a British steam sail ship, which was built in Newcastle. She slid after hitting the reef and is now turned upside down and covered in loads of coral growth. We were able to go inside the hull of the wreck before coming out to look at her rudder and propeller. Inside the wreck was beautiful. There's some huge boilers that are still visible, and some really cool wildlife like nudibranches, as well as a moray eel and stonefish nearby. Upon surfacing, we were treated to the most beautiful sunset, which was honestly breathtaking. We were then out of the water, warmed up a bit for a quick hop over to where we were doing our first night dive, and my first night dive ever, at Beacon Rock. Though I was super nervous at first, it turned out to be a magical experience. I got to see different wildlife to what is about during the day, including a huge Spanish dancer, which is a type of nudibranch, an octopus, and a giant moray eel, which was hunting. Super cool. We then had a yummy dinner and went to sleep, ready for a big next day of diving. Day 3 started with a beautiful sunrise, although I filmed it with a smudge on the window, oops, and we made our way to Thomas Reef in the Strait of Tiran. Although this is Tiran's smallest reef, it was huge and gorgeous with plunging walls covered in coral and colourful fish life. It was like swimming in a giant aquarium, and I absolutely loved this dive. We got to see giant sea fans, shoals of red-toothed triggerfish, and the usual suspects like red sea bannerfish, blue-spotted stingray, parrotfish, reef lizardfish, and emperor angelfish. For me, the last 10 minutes, which were more shallow, really brought out the colours of the wildlife and left me awe-inspired. After surfacing, we drifted back towards the boat, using a line to hold on to before we got out, and warmed up in the sun with a hot drink as we travelled to our next site, Jackson Reef. There were a few boats here already, so we let them enter and delayed our entry to have a more quiet dive site. I'm glad we did, as it was a lovely drift dive along a wall full of coral growth and wildlife. Often called the aquarium, this was a fun dive with some less common fish spotted, including a crocodile fish and a huge Napoleon wrasse, which can grow up to 6 foot. A lot of the other wildlife was similar to Thomas Reef, like rays, bannerfish and sea fans, but we did have the addition of a very inquisitive trumpetfish. Once back on the boat, the mooring lines were quickly picked up and we were on our way to Gordon Reef. When we arrived at Gordon Reef, it was raining, but this made for a beautiful rainbow, and it cleared up before it was our time to dive. Our first dive on Gordon Reef was during the day. My favourite thing we saw was a starry puffer, which was around half a metre long and amazing to see up close. There were, of course, also the usual suspects like bannerfish, parrotfish, a yellow bar angelfish, giant sea fans, and butterfly fish. We remained at the same spot to dive Gordon Reef by night, shortly after the sunset. Although it was hard to recognise the same locations in the dark, we saw bannerfish, imperial urchins, and of course lots of lionfish hunting. Afterwards we had a delicious dinner and an early night, as day 4 was another early start, travelling to Shark Yolanda Reef, where we started at Shark Reef, and this was a stunning dive, with a vertical wall covered in coral, which drops to depths of nearly 800 metres. Swimming along Shark Reef, I then came to Yolanda Reef, which has a wide plateau with beautiful coral gardens. Here there is the remaining cargo of the Yolanda Wreck, a 74-metre long cargo ship which was transporting bathroom supplies. Although the wreck has since dropped into the abyss during a storm, the cargo is left behind, so we get to see toilets, some of which were still very clean, bathtubs and pipes, some of which had great wildlife on them, including a very cute mast puffer, lots of blue spotted stingrays swimming around, and a Napoleon wrasse. I would definitely recommend this dive as a fun drift and a nice location to end before getting picked up by dinghy. We then travelled across to dive Anemone City. This reef in Ras Mohammed National Park was teeming with sea life. As the name implies, it is home to hundreds of anemones with clownfish and damselfish. If you love clownfish, this is definitely the dive for you, as you can get right up to them in some of the largest anemones I've seen. There is, of course, plenty of other wildlife, including the usual suspects of blue-spotted rays. Here they were swimming around, parrotfish, angelfish and butterfly fish. Additionally, on this dive we also saw some eggs. I believe they were sea slug ones, but I'm not 100% sure, which were really cool to see. We then headed over to the Thistlegorm, where it was busy, but we were able to get a spot to start the first of 3 dives on the world famous Thistlegorm Wreck, which was an orientation exterior dive. It was great to be able to appreciate the size of this wreck with a giant propeller and many items still intact. During this dive, I could see the deck-mounted machine gun, locomotives and ladder walkways, as well as wildlife such as the Napoleon wrasse. After the dive, we watched the sunset, which was absolutely stunning, before we were then back in the water for our night dive on the Thistlegorm. There is something special about driving this 126-metre long cargo ship in the dark. Rated one of the best wreck dives in the world, you can really see why. With lots of wildlife, including scorpionfish, clownfish, lionfish, nudibranches, huge spadefish circling around, trunkfish, and even crabs surrounding the cavernous holds and locomotives. After jumping in, the current was really strong, so we ended up holding on closely to the rope on the way down and staying close to the wreck to stay out of the strong current. On the surface, we were treated to a beautiful red moon, followed by a yummy dinner which included camel steak and cheesecake. We woke up moored over the Thistlegorm, and we got to penetrate this enormous wreck to see some of the cargo it contained when it sunk in 1941. There were lots of vehicles, including some motorbikes, trucks, and even strangely enough, a boot. Inside there were lots of silverfish and of course the usual nudibranches. This was a fun dive and definitely a special wreck. After my 3 dives on the Thistlegorm, it was understandable why it was on the bucket list of so many divers. On the way to our next wreck, we warmed up in the sun before diving into the water again for Kingston Wreck. This was a super beautiful wreck, upright on the seafloor at a depth of around 15 metres. If you love wrecks with lots of wildlife, including coral, as well as relatively open swim-throughs, then this is the wreck for you. Particular highlights for me were the open swim-throughs, pulsing xenia encrusted giant clam, nudibranch, and a curious sohal surgeonfish, which has these spines on the back of its tail to protect itself from predators, which may have included some divers.
Although it was calm as we exited the water, the route to our next dive site was relatively rocky, although not as bad as the journey north, and we soon arrived in the protected area where we would dive the barge. The conditions were incredibly still here, and we found out as we entered the water. This dive is less about the small wreck itself and more about the surrounding wildlife. It's a great, relatively shallow dive with the ability to enter and exit directly over the side off the back of the boat. Here, I dove 2 dives, a daytime one, which is the footage you're seeing now. This site had lots of morays,
including 3 different species, as well as
soldierfish, bannerfish, clownfish, and some slightly less common sightings were a mast puffer
and me caught on camera.
After the dive, some of the guests from another dive boat treated us to a water ski show, which was great entertainment, although they didn't really fool in very much. As the sun went down, they finished their water skiing and it was time for us to do our night dive on the barge, seeing lots of similar wildlife than we did during the day, but this time at night. There were quite a lot of divers at this site and some of them had really bright lights which showed these amazing shoals which we otherwise may not have been able to see. The crew woke up early the next morning so that we could wake up already in Abu Nuhas to dive the 3 famous wrecks here, the Carnatic, Chrisoula K and Giannis D, starting with the Carnatic, which is the wreck of a cargo ship which has been split in 2 halves in Abu Nuhas. As an old wreck, having sunk in 1869, a lot of the original wooden structure has rotted away, revealing a almost skeleton-like hull covered in coral, which also makes for a lovely swim through. With over 140 years in the sea, the coral is beautiful and covers all surfaces. Additionally, at the time of sinking, it was carrying bottles of wine, a few of which remain, although I suspect they may have been laid out a little bit for us diving tourists. Some wildlife highlights include clownfish, shrimp, and lots of pipefish.
We even managed to find, quite difficult to spot, bearded scorpionfish nestled amongst the coral before we returned to the surface.
As it was a short distance between sites, we moved from Carnatic to Chrisoula K with the tenders attached. Now, interestingly, Chrisoula K, also known as Tile Wreck, fittingly gets its name as there are thousands of Italian floor tiles within it. They were there as the cargo when it sank, and makes for a fun dive to navigate amongst the tiles, as well as seeing what wildlife is nestled amongst them. Some highlights for me include a shrimp goby and lots of tiger flatworms. It was then a quick hop over to Giannis D, one of the most famous wrecks in Abu Nuhas. It's a 100-metre cargo ship sitting around 27 metres of water. The bow and stern are still intact, giving an opportunity to enter the engine room and see the 2 diesel engines as well as the inner ship workings, with things such as the walkways still there. There are a few things that have broken over the years, such as the U-shaped crane, but it still contained lots of wildlife, including, for me, a personal highlight of the yellow adult colour variant of the orange spotted trevally, as well as an orange spine unicornfish, which have razor-sharp caudal fins sticking out a lot. You should be careful of them when you dive. A mast puffer, grey moray eel, and regal angelfish. We were then back on the boat for a long trip, with lots of lovely sunshine and calm seas all the way back to Dolphin House. Shortly after we arrived, we were visited by some friendly dolphins, which we would have the opportunity to dive with the next day. And the sun began to set, making for a beautiful sky. Of course, it wasn't long before we were back in the water for our final night dive, which by night was tranquil and calm, with interesting wildlife. Rock boring urchins, yellowhead moray eel, barracudas, crown toby, and a collector urchin, joined of course by our usual lionfish friends. As it was the final night at sea, we were cooked up a special feast, which included roast turkey and lots of delicious desserts. We then woke up just after sunrise to have our penultimate dive at Sharb El Erg. There was a pustulose wart slug, scorpionfish, tube worms in coral, and at the very end of the dive, a Napoleon wrasse. During the day, the comments were pretty strong, as you can see, but it did make it quite a fun dive. Shortly after completing our dive, we spotted some dolphins, and we were lucky enough to be able to pop in the tender and go and swim with them. There's something so magical about swimming with wild dolphins. We then headed back to Hurghada, from where our liveaboard started, pausing for our final dive on El Mina just outside the marina. It is an Egyptian minesweeper which lies on its side with some penetration possible. Penetration was really cool due to the amount of glassfish.
And an interesting swim through.
The coral is beginning to populate this wreck with some clear features like the winches still visible. One notable thing is there were lots of pipefish on this wreck, which was fun to slowly swim up and down and find them. We had a wonderful time diving, and as we headed back into the marina where we docked, it was time to pack our bags, have a wander on land, and yes, I did feel landsick, and enjoy our final meal on the boat before departing early the next morning. I would highly recommend doing a liveaboard if you have the opportunity, and hope you enjoyed seeing what this Reefs and Wrecks liveaboard in Egypt was like. If you wouldn't mind liking and subscribing, I'd be really thankful, and hopefully see you in the next video.